In this video, we will discuss the Analog Initialize symbol, speed key, INIT, or init. We can begin by locating the Analog Initialize in the symbol library. Within the symbol library, locate the Analog Operations folder and expand it. Now find the Analog Initialize symbol. Click, hold, drag, and drop it into the Logic folder. Double-click the init to expand it into the detail view. As with most logic symbols, it will come in incomplete. We will need to complete the Analog Initialize by adding signal names to all the lines that are required. For the init to be complete, we need a digital signal for each input or trigger line, a value for each line in the center, and an analog signal on the right or output side for each output signal line. At startup, all init outputs will be set to 0D. Notice we can expand the init symbol as we see white arrowheads on both the input and output sides of the symbol. The init can be expanded in single input form or single output form. We will look at the single input form first. In single input form, there will be only one input or trigger. Select the output line and press Alt+ to add a second output line. There can be up to 999 outputs with corresponding values in single input mode. The single input will trigger the init to set each of the outputs to its corresponding value on the rising edge of the input. We will name this init single input by clicking on the init in the program view and pressing the Tab key. To demonstrate the single input form of the init, we will add some signals to our code. We started with a TS770 touch panel already added to our program. On Digital Press 11, add a signal called Single Input Trigger. Drag that down to the input of the init. Now we will fill in the two values. We will make the first 50% and the second 25%. We can express the values as percentage or decimal values. See the simple help file for more information on numeric formats. We need to create the output signals next. On the init's top output, add an analog signal named init output 1. Add init output 2 to the next analog output line. We will switch the panel symbol to the analog signal page. Select init input 1 and 2 and drag them and drop them on analog feedback 11 and 12 on the panel. We will see how this code works. When the signal input trigger goes high, the rising edge triggers the init to send the value in the center to the corresponding outputs. Init output 1 will get a value of 50%, init output 2 will get a value of 25%. The second way to expand an init is in the single output form. In this configuration, the init will have multiple triggers or inputs with multiple corresponding values and a single output. Begin by dragging another Analog Initialize to the Logic folder from the symbol library. To illustrate this configuration, we will name the init and add some more signals. Begin by naming the second init Single Output. Double-click the new init to expand it into the detail view. Add a second input signal using Alt+. Name the two input signals Input 1 Trigger and Input 2 Trigger. For the corresponding values, enter 30% and 75%. For the init output line, add the signal name init output 3. Bring init output 3 to analog feedback join 14 on the panel. Switch the panel back to the digital signal page. Bring input 1 trigger and input 2 trigger to digital presses 14 and 15. Stepping through the code, we see that when input 1 trigger goes high, the rising edge will trigger the init to send the 30% value to init output 3. When the input 2 trigger signal goes high, the rising edge will trigger the init to send the value of 75% to init output 3. This concludes the video on the Analog Initialize in single input and single output form.